There is a specific kind of fear that comes with isolation. It is not just the fear of being alone. It is the fear that you are not alone. Imagine standing in the middle of a snow-covered field in Bavaria, Germany. It is March 1922. The air is freezing, biting at your skin. The silence is absolute, heavy, like a physical weight pressing down on your chest. You are looking at a farmhouse. It is a sturdy structure, built to withstand the harsh winters, isolated from the rest of the world by a thick forest known as the Witch's Wood. You look down at the pristine white snow. You see footprints. They are heavy, deliberate boot prints. They emerge from the darkness of the dense forest, marching in a straight line directly toward the farmhouse. You follow them with your eyes. They lead to the door. They lead to the windows. They lead to the machine room lock. But then you look for the return tracks. You look for the footprints leading away from the house, back into the woods. There are none. Whoever or whatever walked out of that forest and into the home of the Gruber family never left. They are still inside, watching, waiting, breathing in the darkness of the attic while the family sleeps below. This is not a ghost story. This is not folklore. This is the true, documented account of the Hinterkaifeck murders. A crime so brutal, so bizarre, and so terrifying that it remains Germany's most chilling unsolved mystery a century later. 6 people slaughtered, a killer who lived with the bodies for days, and a puzzle that suggests that sometimes the monster isn't under the bed. The monster is living in the ceiling. To understand the horror of what happened on that Friday night, we must first understand the place. Hinterkaifeck was not a happy home. It was a place of secrets. Located about an hour's drive from Munich, it was an Einödhof, a farmstead standing completely alone. The year was 1922. Germany was a broken nation, still bleeding from the wounds of World War I. Inflation was skyrocketing, poverty was rampant, and the countryside was lawless. But the Gruber family, who owned Hinterkaifeck, was wealthy. They were viewed with suspicion and envy by the nearby villagers of Kaifeck. The patriarch was Andreas Gruber, a 63-year-old man known for his immense physical strength and his cruel, tyrant-like temper. He was not a man who was liked. He was feared. He beat his wife, Kazelia. He controlled his household with an iron fist. There were dark rumors in the village, whispers of incest, rumors that Andreas was the father of his own grandchild. He was a man who had been to prison, a man who kept to himself. Living with him were his wife, Kazelia Gruber, 72 years old, their widowed daughter, Victoria Gabriel, 35, a woman with a beautiful singing voice but a hard life, and Victoria's 2 children, little Cecilia, aged 7, and the baby, Joseph, only 2 years old. It was a house of tension, a house of silence. But in late 1921, the silence began to change. The family's maid, a woman who had worked there for years, suddenly packed her bags. She ran from the house in a state of sheer panic. When the villagers asked her why she was leaving a good job, her answer sent a shiver through the town. She didn't speak of abuse or hard work. She said, simply, "The house is haunted." She told stories of hearing footsteps in the attic when no one was up there, voices whispering in empty rooms, the feeling of being watched from the dark corners of the barn. She refused to spend another night under that roof. Andreas Gruber laughed it off. He was a hard man, a skeptic. He didn't believe in ghosts. But soon, even he couldn't ignore the signs that something was wrong at Hinterkaifeck. In the weeks leading up to March 31st, the atmosphere at the farm shifted from tense to terrifying. The haunting that the maid spoke of became physical. It started with the keys. The keys to the house and the machine shed inexplicably vanished. Andreas searched everywhere. They were gone. Someone had taken them. Then there was the newspaper. One morning, Andreas found a Munich newspaper on his porch. He didn't subscribe to it. The postman hadn't delivered it. No one in the house had bought it. It was just there.
as if someone had been sitting on his porch reading the news while the family slept inside. But the most chilling event occurred after a light snowfall in late March. Andreas went out to check the property and found them. The footprints. They originated from the edge of the forest. They walked directly to the house. Andreas, likely gripping his rifle, circled the entire property. He looked for the tracks leaving. He searched the perimeter. But the tracks only went one way, on. That night, the sounds in the attic became undeniable. Thumping, creaking, the sound of boots pacing back and forth directly above their heads. Andreas Gruber, the man who feared nothing, was rattled. He confided in a neighbor, telling him about the tracks and the noises. The neighbor offered him a gun. He offered to send men to help search the house. But Andreas, stubborn and proud, refused. He wouldn't let strangers into his home. He would handle it himself. He searched the attic. He found nothing. No intruder, no vagrant, just the dust in the dark. But he didn't check the hay. He didn't check the hidden spaces between the roof tiles. Little did he know, he wasn't hunting a ghost. He was hunting a man who was, at that very moment, likely watching him through the cracks in the floorboards. A few days before the end, a set of scratches was found on the lock of the tool shed. Someone had been trying to pick the lock. A mechanic who came to fix an engine on the farm later reported that he heard the family talking about these strange occurrences. He said the atmosphere on the farm was suffocating. Everyone looked tired. Everyone looked terrified. And then Friday came, March 31st, 1922. That afternoon, a new maid arrived. Her name was Maria Baumgartner. She was 44 years old, a kind, hard-working woman. She had been brought to the farm by her sister. She unpacked her bags, likely feeling a sense of relief to have found employment. She couldn't have known that she was walking into a tomb. She had arrived at Hinterkaifeck only hours before her death. As the sun set over the Bavarian forest, a heavy darkness fell over the farm. The chores were done, the cattle were fed, the family prepared for bed. What happens next is a reconstruction based on the gruesome evidence found at the scene. We don't know exactly why, but one by one, the 4 adult members of the family were lured out of the main house into the barn. Investigators believe the killer created a disturbance in the stable. Maybe he untied a cow, maybe he made a noise. The first to go was likely the old couple, Andreas and Kazilia, or perhaps Victoria. They walked from the warmth of the kitchen through the connecting passageway that linked the house to the barn. They opened the heavy wooden door and stepped into the darkness, holding a lantern. The killer was waiting just behind the door. He didn't use a gun. He didn't use a knife. He used a mattock, a heavy farming tool similar to a pickaxe used for digging up roots. As each family member stepped into the barn, they were struck down. One blow to the head. Brutal, efficient, silent. Andreas, Kazilia, Victoria, and little 7-year-old Cecilia. They were piled on top of each other like rag dolls. The killer didn't just kill them, he covered them. He threw hay over the bodies. He took an old door and placed it over the corpse stack, hiding his work. But the horror wasn't over. The killer knew there were others. He walked into the house. The boots that had paced the attic were now walking on the kitchen floor. He went to the maid's room. Maria Baumgartner was unpacking her things, or perhaps sleeping. He killed her in her bed with the same mattock. Then he went to the last room, the room where the 2-year-old baby, Joseph, was sleeping in his bassinet. The killer stood over the crib. He raised the heavy, blood-stained tool, and he struck. By late evening on March 31st, 6 people were dead. The house was silent. Normally, this is where a crime ends. The killer flees into the night, desperate to escape. But at Hinterkaifeck, the crime was just beginning. For the next 3 days, the farm appeared normal to the outside world. Smoke was seen rising from the chimney. The cattle were heard moving in the barn. But the neighbors began to notice small things. On Sunday, the family didn't show up for church. Little Cecilia didn't show up for school on Monday. The postman noticed that the mail from Saturday was still uncollected. A coffee seller stopped by the house to take an order. He knocked on the window. No answer. But he sensed something. He felt like someone was inside, watching him. He left uneasy. Inside the house, the killer was making himself at home. Forensic evidence later showed that after butchering 6 people, the killer went to the kitchen. He ate the family's food. He cut himself bread and sausage. He slept in their beds. And most disturbingly, he took care of the farm. He went out to the barn where the bodies of the family were piled under the hay, and he fed the cattle. He milked the cows. He kept the animals alive. For 3 days and 3 nights, he lived amongst the dead. Who does that? What kind of psychology allows a human being to slaughter a family and then settle in for the weekend? Was it remorse? Was he waiting for something?